I asked, my coffee cup
Zoe, I'm not
paused
coming home
halfway to
tonight.
my lips. The man standing across from me in the coffee shop smiled, and that smile sent a chill straight through me. He was strikingly attractive, the type of man who drew attention without even trying. Dark hair, a chiseled jaw, and eyes that seemed to pierce through any facade you tried to maintain. I had seen him twice before at company gatherings, always beside my husband, always briefly. His name was Julian, and he worked in the same division as my husband at Travala Group, a prominent commercial real estate company in downtown Louisville. He's been staying at his assistant's place for several days now, Julian said quietly, his voice steady. I assumed you were aware. The ambient noise of the coffee shop seemed to dissolve around me. The hiss of steaming milk, the murmur of conversations, the gentle background music, everything felt muffled as though I were submerged underwater. My name is Zoe, and I am 31 years old. I had been married to Bradley for 5 years, and in that instant, inside an ordinary coffee shop on a random Tuesday morning in April, my whole reality shifted violently. I'm sorry, Julian continued, and he appeared truly regretful. I thought when you mentioned the trip that you already understood. Everyone at the office is aware. Everyone at the office is aware. Those words reverberated in my mind like a harsh punchline. I had stopped by this cafe because it was close to the dry cleaner where I had collected Bradley's suits. His suits, which I had thoughtfully chosen for his supposed business journey to Chicago. A journey that apparently never existed. His assistant, I echoed, my voice sounding foreign to me. You mean Patricia? Julian gave a slow nod. I truly am sorry. I believed you knew. The way he speaks about it at times, it sounded as though you both had some kind of understanding. An understanding. As if I had willingly allowed my husband to be with another woman, while I remained at home, diligently arranging his travel plans and preparing his luggage. As if I had cheerfully sent him off on made-up work excursions while fully aware of his real destination. I finally placed my coffee cup on the table next to me because my hands had begun to shake. The dry-cleaning bag containing Bradley's suits draped over my arm like proof of my naivety. I had been such a devoted wife. I had been caring, supportive, patient. When he stayed late at work, I would bring him meals at the office. When he appeared tense, I gave him room. When he mentioned needing to travel for business, I assisted with packing. How long? I asked, unsure if I truly wanted the response. Julian paused, and that pause revealed more than words ever could. This was not something new. This was not a single error. At least a year, he replied at last, possibly more. I only joined the department 8 months ago, and it was already going on at that time. A year, possibly more. I reflected on the past 12 months of my life. The anniversary meal where Bradley had seemed distant. The Christmas when he handed me an impersonal gift card rather than anything meaningful. The many evenings he returned home late, carrying a scent of unfamiliar perfume that I had convinced myself came from the office environment. I need to sit down, I said, and Julian promptly led me to a nearby seat, his touch light on my arm. He took the chair opposite me, his face showing a blend of worry and remorse. I'm sorry that I'm the one delivering this news. I honestly thought you were informed. The way he discusses it around the office, so openly, as if there's nothing to conceal. The embarrassment stung deeper than the betrayal itself. Not only had my husband been unfaithful, but he had been so blatant that his colleagues assumed I was part of the arrangement. They likely viewed me at those company functions and saw me as pitiful. Or worse, believed I simply didn't mind. Can I get you some water? Julian offered. I shook my head. What I needed was not water. What I needed was to turn back the last 5 years and spot all the warnings I had clearly overlooked. What I needed was to comprehend how I had arrived at this point, in a coffee shop, learning about my husband's betrayal from someone I hardly knew. The reality was, I had noticed the signs. I had simply chosen to ignore them. Bradley and I had met 7 years earlier at a professional networking event in Louisville. He was charismatic, driven, and he made me feel like the center of his universe. We dated for 2 years before marrying, and I believed I had found my lifelong partner. I believed I had found the person I would grow old with. I worked as a graphic designer at a modest marketing firm, and although my job brought me satisfaction, it was always Bradley's career that took priority. He was advancing steadily at Travala Group, and I backed him at every stage. I joined him at his professional events, socialized with his coworkers, and never objected when his position required increasing amounts of his time. Looking back, I could pinpoint the start of his emotional withdrawal to roughly 2 years into our marriage. The late evenings grew more common. The work-related travels increased. His phone became something he protected fiercely, always placed face down, always set to silent. When I inquired about it, he accused me of being overly suspicious, and I accepted that explanation. I accepted it because accepting it felt simpler than confronting the other possibility. "Do you want to discuss it?" Julian asked, drawing me back to the moment. I looked at him, truly looked at him. He was likely close to my age, perhaps a year or two older. There was an authentic quality in his expression, something that indicated he took no pleasure in this conversation. He had not come looking for me to share this information. He had simply encountered me at the coffee shop, posed a casual question, and unintentionally dismantled my entire world. "I don't even know where to begin," I confessed. "You don't need to speak," he replied. "I just feel awful for being the bearer of this news. I can't begin to imagine what you're experiencing right now." What I was experiencing was a confusing blend of disbelief, fury, and strangely, a sense of release. Release because now the persistent discomfort in my heart had a clear explanation. Release because I was no longer imagining things, for sensing that something was off. Release because the painful reality, no matter how devastating, was preferable to the haze of doubt and self-deception I had endured. His assistant, I repeated, nearly laughing at how predictable it all sounded. "Patricia has been with him for 3 years. She once came to our home for dinner. She praised my cooking." Julian grimaced. "That's difficult. She sat at my dinner table and told me how fortunate Bradley was to have such a caring wife." The ridiculousness of the situation struck me, and I released a sharp, bitter laugh. I had genuinely thanked her for the kind words. Julian remained silent for a moment. "What are you going to do?" That was the real question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? One part of me wanted to drive straight to Patricia's house and face them both. Another part wanted to return home, gather my belongings, and vanish. Yet another part wanted to ignore this entire conversation and keep living in comfortable denial. "I don't know," I answered truthfully. "Look," Julian said, leaning in a little. "I realize this is entirely out of line considering the situation, but you shouldn't have to face this by yourself right now. Forget about him for a second. How about having dinner with me tonight?" Not as anything romantic, he added swiftly, noticing my reaction. "Just as a person who can listen. Someone who has no involvement in this. You probably don't have colleagues you can confide in about this, and your friends or family might not stay neutral." It was an unusual offer, and under ordinary conditions I would have refused. But these were far from ordinary conditions. In the space of 10 minutes, I had discovered that my husband was dishonest, my marriage was false, and everyone at his workplace knew more about my personal life than I did. "Why would you offer that?" I asked. "Why would you want to spend your evening hearing a stranger complain about her unfaithful husband?" Julian gave a casual shrug. "Because I've watched him strut around the office for months, boasting about his ideal home situation while everyone knew he was deceiving you. Because I've seen Patricia smile smugly whenever your name comes up. Because I believe you deserve the truth, and I believe you deserve far better than what you've received." His words were direct, free of pity or superiority. He was not offering comfort. He was offering something I hadn't realized I craved until then: honesty. "Okay," I heard myself reply. "Dinner." He offered a slight smile and took out his phone. "Share your number with me, and I'll message you the arrangements later. Nothing elaborate, just a peaceful spot where we can talk." As I gave him my number, I wondered if I was doing something foolish. Here I was, having just uncovered my husband's cheating, agreeing to dinner with one of his colleagues. But something about Julian felt sincere. He was the first person in a long time who had been completely honest with me without trying to shield me from the pain. I drove home in a fog. Bradley's dry cleaning still swaying in the back seat like a cruel reminder of my loyalty. Our house was a simple 3-bedroom home in a peaceful suburb. The kind of house we had chosen together, because we imagined filling it with children one day. That vision had slowly disappeared over the years, as Bradley grew more absorbed in his work, and I grew more focused on supporting his ambitions. Now I questioned whether it had ever been a genuine vision at all, or merely another deception to keep me content. Once inside, I sat on the sofa and stared blankly at the wall for what felt like hours. The house was silent, oppressively so. Bradley had departed for his supposed business trip 3 days earlier. He had kissed me on the forehead, said he loved me, and left with the suitcase I had helped prepare. The entire time, he had known precisely where he was heading and who he would be with. I took out my phone and reviewed our recent text exchanges. His replies were short and routine, landed safely. Busy with meetings all day, miss you. Every single one was a falsehood disguised as normal married conversation. I had responded to each with love and warmth, telling him I loved him, asking about his activities. Entirely unaware that he was not in Chicago but just minutes away at another woman's home. The anger began to rise then, gradually at first, then with growing force. I remembered all the occasions I had defended Bradley to my mother, who had always found him overly smooth, too polished. I remembered my best friend Chloe, who had softly hinted that Bradley's work hours appeared excessive. I remembered my own intuition, which I had repeatedly quieted because I wanted so badly to trust in the life we had created. My phone vibrated with a message from Julian. There's a cozy Italian restaurant on 4th Street called Ember. 7 o'clock, I'll book a table. I stared at the text for several seconds before replying, I'll be there. The time until dinner passed in a disorienting way. Hours seemed to drag and then suddenly rush forward. I attempted to focus on work, but the design task I was meant to complete felt meaningless. I tried to eat something, but the idea of food turned my stomach. I started to call Chloe, but hung up before it rang because I wasn't prepared to voice the words to someone who cared about me. At 6:30, I slipped into a plain black dress. Not to impress anyone, but because changing clothes gave me a task to occupy my mind. I studied myself in the mirror and hardly recognized the woman looking back. She appeared older than 31. She looked exhausted. She looked like someone who had been gradually worn down by years of quiet betrayals, each one so small that she had failed to notice the total impact. Ember was a serene restaurant featuring soft lighting and rustic brick walls. Julian was already seated when I arrived, at a private corner table with a glass of water before him. He rose as I approached, holding out my chair as though this were a proper date rather than an unusual conversation. "Thank you for showing up," he said once I was seated. "I wasn't certain you would." "I almost didn't," I confessed. "This entire day has felt like a dream." He nodded with empathy. "I can only imagine, or perhaps I can't. I've never experienced what you're going through." A server stopped by, and I requested a glass of wine while Julian asked for sparkling water. Once we were alone, he rested his hands on the table and regarded me with those insightful eyes. "I should mention something," he began. "I've been thinking about contacting you for months. Every time Bradley would boast about how loyal you were, or how completely unaware you seemed, it bothered me deeply. But I didn't know how to reach out without crossing a line. So running into me at the coffee shop was convenient," I remarked, more like fate stepping in and making the decision for me. He paused. "I know that might sound overly dramatic. I'm not trying to exaggerate. It's simply that I've observed this entire situation develop over 8 months, aware that there was a woman who deserved to learn the truth and feeling powerless to act." I took a sip of my wine when it arrived, allowing the warmth to ease through me. "Tell me everything," I said. "I need to hear all of it." Julian's face became solemn. "Are you certain?" "Some details will be painful to hear. I've spent years remaining ignorant of things that everyone else apparently understood. I'm finished with being shielded from reality." He drew a deep breath and started speaking. He described how Bradley and Patricia acted at the office, hardly bothering to conceal their involvement. He spoke of their private jokes, the prolonged touches, the way they would depart together nearly every night. He recounted a company retreat 6 months earlier, where they had stayed in the same room, and how Bradley had chuckled when asked about me, claiming that what I didn't know wouldn't cause me any harm. Each new detail felt like another wound, but I didn't ask him to halt. I needed to absorb it all. I needed to grasp the complete extent of the disloyalty, so that when I eventually faced Bradley, I would remain firm. I would not allow him to manipulate me into believing I was exaggerating. There's one more detail, Julian said, lowering his voice. And this is the part that truly pushed me to speak up. I prepared myself. What Patricia is expecting. She shared the news with the office last week. She's keeping it low-key for now, but it will become known soon enough. He stopped, observing my reaction. I'm sorry. I know this is overwhelming. I set my wineglass down slowly because my hands were trembling once more. Expecting. Bradley's lover was carrying a child. The man who had spent 3 years insisting he wasn't prepared for fatherhood had impregnated another woman. Zoe. Julian's voice seemed distant. Are you okay? I was not okay. But somehow in that instant, a strange sense of clearness settled over me. This was the moment. This was the reality I required. There was no returning now, no chance for repairing things. No way to convince myself this could be resolved. My husband had not simply been unfaithful. He had constructed a completely separate existence. One that was about to grow in ways that rendered my role in his life entirely irrelevant. I need to know one last thing, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Why did you care enough to tell me? You hardly know me. Why did any of this concern you? Julian stayed quiet briefly. Because 3 years ago I discovered my fiancé was being unfaithful and nobody informed me. Everyone knew, yet no one spoke up. I had to learn the truth by walking in on them. He held my gaze. I promised myself I would never allow another person to suffer that kind of sudden shock if I could prevent it. You deserve to hear it from someone who would deliver the news with care, rather than discovering it yourself in the worst possible way. In that moment, sitting across from this man who had just given me the most devastating truth of my life, I understood something important. He wasn't sharing this information merely out of a sense of duty. He was sharing it because he knew, from personal experience, exactly what it felt like to be the last to find out. And that shared understanding made him the only person I wanted near me in that moment. Dinner with Julian stretched for 3 hours. The meal was delicious, although I hardly noticed the taste. We discussed many things, his broken engagement, my failing marriage, the unusual events that had led us to that coffee shop encounter. By the time we exited the restaurant, I felt as though I had known him for years instead of just hours. Thank you, I said as he escorted me to my car. For sharing the truth, for the dinner, for not handling me as if I might break. You're not fragile, he replied. Fragile people don't endure 3 hours of difficult revelations and still maintain their strength. You're tougher than you realize. I wanted to trust his words. Standing there in the parking lot, with the crisp April breeze against my skin and the burden of my broken marriage weighing heavily. I desperately wanted to believe I possessed the strength to face whatever lay ahead. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know yet. Part of me wants to challenge him the moment he returns home. Part of me wants to leave before he even arrives. Julian nodded. Whatever choice you make, ensure it's for yourself, not to punish him or prove a point, but because it's what you truly need. I drove home without music, replaying his advice in my thoughts. When I reached the house, I did something I had never done during 5 years of marriage. I searched through Bradley's belongings, his desk, his drawers, his half of the closet. I discovered credit card bills for restaurants I had never visited. I found receipts for jewelry I had never seen. I found a second phone hidden inside an old coat pocket. The screen was damaged and the battery was drained. I connected the phone to a charger and waited. When it finally turned on, the lock screen displayed a photo of Bradley and Patricia. They were grinning at the camera, embracing each other, appearing like any joyful couple. The date on the image showed it was taken 8 months earlier. 8 months earlier, I had organized a surprise birthday celebration for Bradley. I had invited all his friends and coworkers. Patricia had attended, standing in my living room, enjoying the cake I had prepared, while involved in an affair with my husband that everyone else seemed to know about except me. I browsed through the phone's messages with a grim curiosity. The exchanges between Bradley and Patricia were intimate in ways that made me feel sick, but even more painful than the physical details were the affectionate messages. The declarations of love, the conversations about their plans together, the criticisms of me. How I was dull, routine, too ordinary for someone as ambitious as Bradley. One message stood out to me, sent just 3 weeks earlier. Patricia had written, "When are you planning to tell her? I can't keep waiting like this. The baby changes everything." Bradley's response read, "After the Henderson deal closes, I need that bonus first. Once the money is in place, I'll file for divorce and we can finally begin our life together." The Henderson deal. I knew all about it. Bradley had been obsessing over it for months, how it would bring in the largest commission of his career, how it would transform everything for us. For us, what a cruel joke. I continued scrolling. There were countless photos of their shared life, dinners at upscale restaurants, weekend escapes to locations Bradley had claimed were work obligations. One image showed Patricia wearing a necklace that matched the receipt I had discovered earlier in his desk. I sat on the bedroom floor, surrounded by undeniable proof of my husband's deception, and I broke down. These were not gentle tears. They were raw, heaving sobs that rose from deep within. I cried for all the years I had lost. I cried for the family I had imagined we would build. I cried for the version of myself I had slowly become. A woman so determined to preserve the appearance of a perfect marriage that she had overlooked every red flag along the way. When the crying finally subsided, a change had taken place inside me. The sorrow remained, but beneath it lay something firmer, something that resembled determination. Bradley was scheduled to return from his so-called business trip in 2 days. I had 48 hours to decide what kind of woman I would be moving forward. The one who would face him head-on and demand explanations. Or the one who would silently collect her proof and carefully orchestrate her departure. I chose the latter. Over the next 2 days, I carefully documented every piece of evidence. I captured screenshots of the phone's contents before the battery drained again. I duplicated the credit card records and all the receipts. I reached out to a divorce lawyer named Victoria, who came strongly recommended by someone at my agency. I opened a separate bank account under my name alone and discreetly moved half of our shared savings into it, something Victoria assured me I had every legal right to do. Julian sent me 2 brief messages during those days, simply checking whether I was all right. I valued his restraint. He never pressed for details or gave unwanted suggestions. He simply made it clear he was available if I needed someone to listen. On the evening Bradley was due back, I prepared dinner. I arranged the table using our best china. I uncorked a bottle of wine. To any outside observer, it would have appeared as a loving wife greeting her husband after a long work journey. When Bradley entered the house at 7:30 that evening, suitcase in hand and a relaxed smile on his face, I was prepared. "Something smells wonderful," Bradley said, placing his bag down and leaning in to kiss my cheek. "I missed you." The sheer boldness of that comment nearly made me laugh out loud. He had just spent 4 days at another woman's home, in another woman's bed, making plans for their future. And now he stood here, lying to me effortlessly as though it required no effort at all. "How was Chicago?" I asked, keeping my tone remarkably even. "Cold, tiring, but the meetings went smoothly. Henderson should be signing next week." He poured himself a generous glass of wine and leaned casually against the kitchen counter, looking completely relaxed. "What about you? Anything interesting happen while I was away?" I thought about Julian. I thought about the coffee shop encounter, the long dinner, and the hours of honest conversation. I thought about the second phone now safely stored in my nightstand drawer, fully charged and loaded with evidence. "Actually, yes," I replied. "I bumped into one of your colleagues, Julian." He was at the coffee shop close to the dry cleaner. The shift in Bradley's expression was slight but impossible to miss. A brief flash of alarm, or perhaps calculation, crossed his features before he quickly masked it with indifference. "Julian, the new guy handling commercial acquisitions, that's him." I lifted my own wine glass, observing him carefully over the rim. He seemed surprised to see me. "Mentioned he thought you were out of town this week." Bradley's jaw clenched visibly. He must have mixed things up. There are always several deals happening at once. "Maybe," I said calmly. "We ended up having coffee together. He's actually quite engaging. We had plenty to discuss." "What exactly did you talk about?" "Oh, various things, mostly work. Your work in particular." I set my glass down and met his eyes directly. He told me about Patricia, Bradley. All the color drained from Bradley's face. For several long seconds, silence hung between us. The only sounds were the low buzz of the refrigerator and the faint barking of a dog down the street. "I don't know what he said to you," Bradley finally managed, "but he told me everything I cut in. Everything. The affair, the fake business trips, the company retreat where you shared a room with her. And the pregnancy. I watched his face collapse with each revelation. He told me she's pregnant, Bradley. Bradley placed his wine glass on the counter with a trembling hand. Zoe, I can explain. There's nothing left to explain. I found the second phone, Bradley. The one you hid inside your jacket. I've gone through the messages. I've seen the pictures. I know all about the Henderson deal and your plan to file for divorce once the bonus was secure. My voice stayed calm, almost detached. I had spent 2 full days readying myself for this confrontation, and I refused to let it spiral into emotional chaos. Bradley's control finally shattered. How dare you search through my belongings, he growled. That's an invasion of my privacy. I let out a genuine laugh. Your privacy. You've been involved with another woman for over a year, lying to me every single day, and now you're worried about your privacy? You don't understand the full picture. I understand it completely. You married me because I was convenient. I was supportive, low maintenance, and always willing to place your priorities above my own. And when someone more thrilling appeared, you kept me in the picture because I still served a purpose. Someone to run the household, manage your schedule, and help you maintain the right image at work functions. I shook my head slowly. But you were always intending to walk away once I was no longer useful to you. Bradley's expression changed from defensive to strategic. Listen, we can get past this. Every couple faces difficult periods. We could attend counseling together. Patricia is pregnant, I stated plainly. You're expecting a child with someone else. There is no counseling that can fix that. Before Bradley could reply, a sharp knock sounded at the front door. We both went still. Another knock followed, louder and more urgent this time. Are you expecting anyone? Bradley asked. I shook my head and moved toward the door. When I opened it, Julian stood on the porch, his face tense with concern. I'm sorry for dropping by without notice, he said. But Patricia is heading this way right now. She learned that you know everything and she's coming to confront you. I wanted to give you a heads up. Behind me, I heard Bradley mutter a curse. Julian glanced past me into the house, and his expression hardened when he spotted Bradley standing there. You, Bradley spat, shoving past me to confront Julian directly. You had no business telling her anything. This was not your concern. Julian held his ground without flinching. She asked me a straightforward question, and I gave her a straightforward answer. Something you clearly haven't been able to do for years. Bradley moved closer, his hands balled into fists. Stay out of my marriage. What marriage? Julian fired back. At that moment, another car pulled into the driveway. Headlights swept across the front of the house as Patricia stepped out, her hand resting protectively on her still small bump. Her face was flushed with anger and determination. So this is how it ends? She called out, her voice sharp as she approached the open door. You couldn't even tell her yourself, Bradley. You let some coworker do your dirty work. Bradley looked trapped between the two of us and Julian. Patricia, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time, she snapped, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I'm tired of hiding. I'm carrying your child and I'm done pretending. Zoe, I never meant for it to happen like this, but I'm not sorry it happened. Bradley loves me. He's been planning to leave you for months. I stood there, taking in the chaotic scene unfolding in my own living room. My husband, his pregnant mistress, and the colleague who had accidentally shattered my illusions. Strangely, I felt calmer than I had in years. I looked at Bradley, then at Patricia, and finally at Julian, who remained steady and silent by the door. You're both right about one thing, I said quietly, my voice carrying more strength than I expected. This is how it ends. Bradley, I want you out of this house tonight. You can stay with Patricia since you've already made yourself so comfortable there. I've already spoken with a lawyer. The evidence is documented and secure. We'll handle the rest through proper channels. Patricia opened her mouth to argue, but I raised my hand. And you, congratulations on the baby. I hope you both find the happiness you think you deserve, but don't expect any part of my future to include either of you. Julian stepped forward slightly, his presence calm yet protective. If you need anything tonight, Zoe, I'm just a call away. Bradley started to protest, but the fight had already drained from his face. The carefully constructed double life he had built was collapsing in real time, and there was nothing left for him to say. As Patricia and Bradley began exchanging heated words, I walked to the kitchen. poured myself another glass of wine, and sat down at the table. For the first time in years, the house no longer felt like a cage. It felt like the beginning of something that finally belonged to me. Julian lingered near the doorway for a moment longer, offering a small nod of quiet support before stepping outside. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, the legal battles, the emotional aftermath, or the slow process of rebuilding. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was no longer the woman who ignored the truth to protect a lie. I was ready to step forward into a life defined by honesty, even if it meant walking through the pain first. And somehow, in the middle of the wreckage, that realization felt like freedom. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a twist. Stay tuned to Reddit Tales Times for your daily dose of drama, laughs, and unbelievable stories.